Okay, folks, can you hear me okay? Wave or do something, or almost anything, really. Fantastic. Fabulous. Thank you, Andrew, that's great, and Hannah too, yeah. That's really a device to get you saying stuff in the chat window. So welcome, hi Dorota. So welcome to Shane's webinar, and I'm just going to do a couple of introductions. So I'm Rob Ward, for the people that don't know. It says on the screen, on my screen, which is slightly worrying, knows who I am. And we're hosting this webinar, delighted to host it, because it's a kind of area of interest that we've had for a long time, but a lot of people are talking about now, the notion of the student experience and the importance of seeing that in a much more, in a much richer way, and the notion of the tutor as an active agent in supporting student development has really come back to the fore again. I used to do a presentation ages ago. It used to be an advert on television, which you may remember, which had the strapline, "Everybody remembers a good teacher." And my challenge used to be, in 30 years' time, will we be seeing adverts saying everybody remembers a good VLE? And my sense was probably that wouldn't be the case. It's great that that's come up the agenda. It's great that Pebble Pad are doing some work with all of you in this kind of territory. I'm delighted to be able to hand over to my very good friend Shane in a moment or two. And I'm just going to do a couple of things as we go along. Shane will explain more about how he's going to run the session, but what I am going to do is to prod you from time to time if you're not writing questions or opinions or rude observations or anything like in that chat window, because we want, as we go along, to be able to have a conversation. Webinars, I think, work best where they are conversational, and sometimes that's very rich and illuminating and valuable, and sometimes the poor old presenter doesn't get anybody saying anything, which won't happen here, and we all go away feeling that perhaps it wasn't the opportunity we wanted it to be. So it's about turning this into a conversation and a community for the next hour, and without more ado, I'm going to hand on to Shane. I'm going to turn my microphone off. We'll probably mute all microphones from incoming people just to keep out the sound of people eating sandwiches, making phone calls. Keyboards are really loud on this system, I have to say. And so I'm going to contribute to the air of unnatural silence through which Shane will generate important and illuminating content. Okay, so thank you very much, Shane. Thank you everybody for joining us. I'll turn off my mic. I might turn off my camera when I'm eating a sandwich. But I will keep an eye on the chat box, and I encourage you all to jot your thoughts down as we go along, and Shane will explain how he's going to run things. Thanks, Shane.
No, thank you, Rob, and thanks everyone for joining us. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm at a bit of a disadvantage because of two things. One, you can see me and I can't see you. And I'm not going to know if I start involuntarily sort of scratching my chin or twitching my ear or something. So I hope I behave here. But also, I've been to the dentist this morning, so half my mouth is still slightly numb. So I hope you can understand what I'm saying. And I'm delighted actually that I recognise so many of you in the group here. What I'm going to do is start off with a few slides, just to give a bit of background to why Flourish. Then show you the system as it stands at the moment from a student perspective, and then I'll take a bit of a pause. We'll check the chat questions, have a bit of a chat or answer some questions if we can then. And then I'll look at it from the sort of tutor stroke institutional side, and again we'll deal with any questions that come up. I guess if something really important happens halfway through, or you think I make a real faux pas, just jot it in big bold letters in the chat room, and Rob can stop me mid-flow, and we'll deal with the issue then. So So here we go, something about Flourish, and really interested in what you think about this, because this is a brand new tool for us. Really, we're working, we went around chatting to a whole bunch of people. We then spent more time talking to folks from Edinburgh, Keele, Sheffield, Hallam, and other conversations elsewhere to get a feel for what we ought to be doing. And so this is very much, although we've done the coding, it's a result of lots of conversations with our users. And I think for those of you that are Pebble Pad users, you know that's how we like to try to work anyway. I have to try not to make this all sales pitchy. It's not. It's just me trying to explain what we do. So, Rob, if I veer off too much to being a vendor, please also shout at me. So let's start to move through the slides. Now, presumably, there we go. What is this thing called Flourish? 10%. I wish I got 10%. So we're calling it a guided development space, and I'll sort of situate where the tool fits into the other suite of tools later on. But the idea is it's that part of the system where a learner interest in guiding their achievement, development, progression, and success. It's designed around individual users, and certainly in a sort of tutoring capacity, from the point of view of the student, it will be a one-to-one role, so the student and their personal tutor, or a novice teacher, for example, and their mentor. But also you can have multiple guides. Oh, the ear's not that long, Claire. Oh dear, not quite sure what might be causing that. If it continues to be a problem, I can switch to another mic actually. So please do keep me updated on the sound. So yeah, if a student is for example a research student, they might well have multiple guides. So a primary research supervisor, a second supervisor, maybe a subject expert. System supports that as well. And obviously from the perspective of the institution, tutors will often have many students allocated to them, and so we have tools for managing groups. What happens when learners go into Flourish is they see a timeline which shows them the things they've been doing or information they've been receiving, so information particularly such as grades and feedback, and things which are coming up, so meetings they might have and tasks to attend to. And all of these items in the timeline can be flagged, and that's an action that the tutor does. So when looking at a student's timeline, you can flag an item so that when you get together in the real world, you can look back at those flagged items and form a conversation around them. I'll come to that in a second, Rob, about where it sits. I think I'll come to that in a moment. But if I don't, remind me, please. You can comment on any items as well, and the idea is that there's a conversation which can start to take place around this information. And I would say that dialogue is a very big part of the system. So if you don't get to meet each other regularly, there are tools to ensure a conversation can take place, and of course that will be particularly useful where there's some distance between the learner and the people supporting them. So where this sits in our sort of our growing suite of tools, I suppose, there's Pebble Plus, the learning space, Atlas, the assessment space, and then there's Flourish, which is the guided learning space. So the three sort of components do quite different things, but they're all part of the same suite of tools. And why have we put all the effort we've put into building this? Well, it's, as Rob mentioned at the beginning, there's been this proliferation of tutoring schemes. And I think they vary. Oh, quite a bit of crackling. Okay, keep my hands away from my beard. This is awful. I'll move the microphone up a little bit as well. Maybe that will make things a bit better. And we'll also blame it on the dentist. So there has been this real growth, and it's, you know, we could we could what's the word, speculate as to whether the increase in fees has all of a sudden made institutions a bit more caring about the progression and achievement of their students. But something has happened, and many more institutions are taking that success and progression really, really seriously. And so, but there aren't the tools. There are some tools around, but there aren't many tools in wide use to help support these kind of processes. There have been difficulties managing research students, and the acres of paperwork they have to kind of fill in, and very rigorous tasks and milestones they have to attend to during their studies. And that's particularly difficult, I think, because they aren't necessarily in regular contact with their supervisors. The links to VTI, there are none there yet. That may be something to explore. There are versions of the VTI pro forma within PebblePad itself, and so that's an easy thing to link, but to the VTI system, none yet. But we are working on integrations with other tools. So some of you may know Stephen Vickers, formerly of Edinburgh. He's been working with us this week. He now works for IMS Global, who develop interoperability standards, and we've been working on a means of connecting with and getting grades and feedback from the main VLEs. A moment, think about those research students. Some institutions we've been talking to have said there is a problem managing research students, but there's also quite a problem managing research supervisors. And so will help administrative teams in particular ensure that research supervisors fulfill their part of the contract for their research students, so have regular meetings and provide feedback and keep up to date with the tasks the students have to do. We're certainly seeing more and more use of our system in, I've called it performance management, you know, performance review, appraisal, even, you know, mentoring and coaching, and we think the tool will support that. And we have a number of people use our system for executive coaching too. So things like Atlas, which have very, very strong assessment functions, are actually a bit too institutionally focused for small organizations interested in things like executive coaching. We think Flourish will provide a really useful platform for them too. So I think back to the question you asked a moment ago, Rob, the tool really does, it allows a small, close relationship between a learner and someone who's responsible for them. It allows them to maintain contact with each other. It allows, and in an academic context, it allows an overview of grades and feedback. And so it could be used for pastoral counselling, could be used for academic counselling, it could be used for group support. There's a whole, so all we've done is provide a number of tools which support that guiding process. And of course it's very early for us. This only goes into partial release in January. And once it goes into use, we'll have all sorts of requests for additional features and for tweaking and the like. But there's definitely a big role for a tool like this from what we hear from people. So I'll do this bit reasonably quickly. Pebble Plus is the personal space, Atlas the organizational stroke assessment space, and Flourish is this sort of shared one-to-few kind of space. And the sort of the levels of privacy and ownership change across the system. Importantly for us, Pebble Plus, the sort of, if you like, the more portfolio part of the system, remains totally private and owned by the user. In Flourish, we're sort of looking really at shared privacy between the student and their tutor. There's co-ownership of the materials that are on there, but learners will always keep ownership of their own constructed materials. And its purpose is to support overall progression. Now, the relationship might change over time. So I might start as an undergraduate and have a relationship, I'll be careful how I say that, with a tutor. And as I move on to my postgraduate studies, that tutor might disappear from that relationship to be replaced by another tutor. But my timeline remains the same. It's just an ongoing record of what I've done, what I've said, my reflections and the like. And just another person becomes party to that. And once I leave, the institution keeps a record of that, necessarily like assessment, because it's proof that the institution has been supportive of my learning. Very briefly, you build stuff, share stuff, collaborate on stuff in Pebble Plus, you have stuff assessed in Atlas. In Flourish, this is what we're trying to achieve. There's this idea of tracking progress over time across multiple modules or courses, a place to see all of your feedback and all of your grades. And I should say here that one of the things we really want to achieve is that if you don't have the benefit of a personal tutor, that Flourish will start to act as a sort of proxy tutor. So it will say things like, hey, I mean, we won't talk quite like this, but hey, you've had a bunch of grades released. Would you like to use this reflective template to think about a pattern amongst your grades or how you might improve your grades over time? Likewise, when feedback comes in, there'll be things which say, would you like to think about how to plan to integrate your feedback into your future performance? So it's designed to be facilitated, or it's designed to be a guide there, but we also want it to act in place of a guide if that guide hasn't been allocated to you. So that's kind of all the background to it, and I guess it's probably a good time to have a little look at what it looks like. So this is it as it stands right now. I'm in here as a student, and you can see my my timeline here. Maybe what I'll do is close that and start off, because I know a number of you will be interested in this bit. This is, if you like, a new Pebble Pad, and it has a dashboard which tells me what's going on across the system and from other systems too. So I don't have to go to Flourish. You know, I don't have to know what Flourish does in a way. I don't have to know as a learner that it's my guided development space. I can just see things that have happened or things I need to do, and clicking on one of those will take me straight through to the Flourish environment. And this is that progression meeting, and it's in my upcoming items. And I can see that it's on campus, and I can see what the date is and who's going to be there, and the things I have to do in advance. And I have other items I need to attend to in the next 21 days. Or maybe I'd rather look at the next 30 days. I can set those individually or independently. I also have this timeline, so I can see that I've had a new grade release. So on this left-hand column, I'm getting sort of update information happening and what's going to happen. And that's simply filtering it, either my list of upcoming items or, in this case, things that have happened. So here's my timeline. I can see a little selection of my grades that have come in. 2 of these items have been flagged. So if I look at that, I can see it's been flagged by my tutor as worthy of a discussion in the next tutorial. Now you're going to have to excuse the fact that at the moment most of the stuff in here is, you know, quickly made up. It's our test environment. It's not even quite the latest version. It's just a version that's publicly or that I'm able to share with you. I should say that with grades, what we will be doing is giving people, you know, making much more use of infographics, and we want to work brackets sensibly towards giving users comparative data as well, so that if it's appropriate, to show them how they are performing relative to others in their cohort. So they can make some independent decisions about their ongoing actions as well, or have that brought to their attention by their tutor. So here are my grades, but equally I can see my feedback. And as I mentioned, we've been working on an LTI integration this week, which will enable us to get grades and feedback out of any LTI compatible LMS as well. So I can see that I've got a little bit of feedback here. I can see what the feedback's on, where it came from, who it's by. Unfortunately, in this example, I'm feeding back on my own work. And for everything that's in the timeline, I can write comments about it. So I'm happy with this feedback, or what this makes me realize is. And all of those comments can, irrespective of what they're on, sorry, I need this one here, I can look at all of my comments in one place as well and get a sense of all the actions and activities I've been involved in. So this timeline allows me to see different things, what's coming up, all the conversations I've had. A user, of course, wouldn't normally have administration. Let me go to upcoming items to show you now a task that I've set. And these are quite important for us. I'm sure most of you involved in tutoring will know that the bane of the tutor's life is that the student turns up and has done absolutely no preparation at all. And the bulk of the meeting is sort of fact-finding. So one of the things we'd like the system to support is the ability to create activities in advance which are distributed to learners. And in this case, because of course it's hooked up to PebblePad, we've added 2 templates, and we're asking students to complete the templates prior to the tutorial. So there's a tutorial preparation plan and a reflective template, and I've enabled them to add a linked item, and I'm asking them to link to their PDP portfolio. If a learner goes to click on one of those, now in the version that we're in at the moment, this will open, oh, does that work? Oh, I've got a pop-up blocker on this one. Allow pop-ups. Okay, let's try that again. This is launching Pebble Plus. It will find that template for me, open that template, and I can start to fill it in. I won't wait for that to launch because it's running on a very slow server, but you'll see these then get marked as in progress. When I've completed it, I can mark it as complete. And these are subparts of the overall task, which has its own progression. Now this is simple at the moment, simple, not started, in progress and completed. We're going to work on a variety of different measures that will be implemented over time to give you more granularity. But the important thing here is that it's going to give the tutor the ability to get reports on how a group of users are doing on those particular tasks. And I'll show you those reports in just a moment. Significant is if you have a large research program, for example, you can distribute those tasks to, maybe well, the number is immaterial, but a couple of hundred students who may be in small groups with individual research supervisors, and at a glance you can see how all those various cohorts are doing against those tasks you've created. I should also explain that those tasks can be aggregated. So you can say, well, these 3 or 4 tasks make up a semester 1 milestone. And then there's a bunch of other tasks which make up a year 2 milestone. And there's a bunch of other tasks that are completed prior to completing my course. And all of those milestones themselves can be tied together into a pathway. And there's very interesting, and I think quite clever functionality which allows those tasks, milestones or pathways to be distributed many, many times to save the administrative burden for institutions. And they have very clever like date I'm not sure how to describe it. The dates can be, the dates can be moved on a month or whatever across the whole of the pathway, and indeed the pathways can be modified rather than rewritten for different groups. I probably need some pictures for all of that. I'll work on the pictures. So just as I leave the student-facing part of this, I guess a quick reminder, I can see what's been going on in my timeline. I can filter for all sorts of things like highlighted or flagged items, grades that I've received and the like. And I can see items that I have to do, like meetings with my tutor, tasks that I have to attend to, and indeed I can create or arrange my own meetings and post ideas and thoughts to the timeline. So that's the student bit, and I think it's probably a good time for me to pop back to the chat and see what some of the questions are. So, Rob, you've been keeping an eye on that better than I have.
Yeah, so a lot about your beard.
Yeah, sorry about
You don't want to talk about those in detail. Carol's raised a question about audio feedback. Would like a facility to upload audio feedback into comment fields, from Carol Higgison. We'll perhaps just go through these as they are and then maybe unmute mics for any comments that people want to have before you move on, Shane. But yes, the audio question is one from Carol.
Yeah, well, that's not something really specific to Flourish. It's something where we want to be able to provide that facility at any point in the system. And our new, and I don't want to move too far from Flourish, but the single page application, which is all HTML5, is coming along really nicely. And there are so many things we can do in this new, if you like, technology environment that we're developing that's been really difficult for us in the past. So yes, expect that. I can't possibly give you a time when that's going to happen, but expect it because we know it's a really nice thing to be able to do. And I think people will know as well as in the app that's coming out in January, you can directly record audio and video into the app and save that and synchronize that with your portfolio. So as technology, or at least as we're embracing the very latest technology, so much more becomes achievable and much more quickly than it was in the past for us too.
Okay, fantastic. Then there's an issue about synchronization, which Claire has raised. Have you got that? Can you see that?
Let me scroll up a bit. It'd be probably useful if you could. Does it?
Okay.
With I'm not sure what's SI. Not sure what SI is, but
it's SI Sims. Claire, can you tell us? First two student records, okay. I guess it might be student information, it might be a SIM system then. So okay. Student record system and a VLE, I mean those are the key kind of management information systems and Blackboard, and I guess it's where it gets its information from in real time. Yeah,
well I think there's two parts to that. There's getting information from and sharing information back to.
Yeah.
So we're absolutely not wanting to be precious, so we are using LTI at the moment to distribute grades and feedback out of our system and into the VLE. We're using LTI to get grades, or that's what we've been working on, to get grades and feedback from the LMS. We've also been working on an LTI service to get group information out of the LMS. And that's because the LMS, or sorry, VLE, tends to be much more integrated at the moment with the student management system. And it often has better data than we can get from elsewhere. But people like Banner and Tribal at the moment are working on a standard called LIS. And the idea is with this it's another, sorry to use all sorts of acronyms, but I didn't make them up. IMS LIS standard means that those systems will be able to share group data and others. And we already do that with Edinburgh, for example, and any institution can. Because, of course, if you've got a very large group of students allocated to a pathway or a milestone or task, you don't want to manually add those. And so all those integrations are in place at the moment, but not all of them are as smooth as we would like, and partly that's because we're waiting for either institutions or the systems they use to catch up with us. But open standards is the way forward there, and we've always tried to adopt open standards where we can.
Okay, good stuff. And of course, tribal are the SITS people, so that kind of maybe connects into that nicely. Okay, I asked a question when you said people can highlight items about who does that, and I guess I was thinking about this notion of a place for joint engagement between tutor and student. And so that was the context of that question. It's not a key question, I think, in lots of terms, but it just raised the question about who initiates stuff in this shared space, whether both, because the question about, and it also relates again to who's in control of the tutorial.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And in fact, flagging and highlighting are exactly the same act. We've just sort of given them different names. So if I'm looking at my timeline, and I think, let's see, oh, okay, so I've got this grade here, and what I want to do is highlight it because I'm a bit concerned or confused that, let's go back a second, show all of my grades. As I look down my grades, I see I've been doing pretty well. I've got a B and a B13 and a B11 and an A14, and all of a sudden this 79% rocks up. And I'm not quite sure what that's all about.
Okay.
So I'm going to highlight it as a learner now and say why all of a sudden, you know, and not a grade, or I really think I deserved more than this, or whatever it happens to be. And that puts a marker in the timeline, and that will alert my tutor to the fact that I've highlighted a thing. And the flags are just the same process, but initiated by the tutor. And it's a way so that, if you like, as we're preparing for the tutorial, I've got so much stuff in my timeline, the highlights and the flags bring my attention to things that I really want to go back and have a conversation about. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. Yeah, most of the people are muted, so they're never going to answer. Except for the chat box. Yeah, it does, and it's about foregrounding stuff. In both parties, maybe. Okay, moving down, because I'm conscious we're going to run out of time if we're not careful. There's a question from Wayne about integration with the VLE and the student record system, which we kind of touched on a little bit.
That's the same answer, I think.
Yeah, okay. Carol said, no, I know, but I don't know what she knows. It's important. The VTI RDF, I mean, maybe there are, yeah. So, I mean, there's two bits to VTI, I think, that, of course, not everybody uses VTI. One is the planner, which does seem to have some functionality that might relate to this. And the other is the kind of research and development framework as a background, which I guess can be utilized within this sort of structure. But just to note that, really. Claire, okay.
I mean, I think one way to, and I don't know if this is the right answer, but if I go to my store in PebblePad, in fact this is not my account here, which is a shame, or rather it's my test account, you'll see I've got an integration with Google Docs and with Mozilla Backpack. So if the VTI is made available to through again an open service or an OAuth service, we can just, PebblePad doesn't have to consume it, or it doesn't have to be conducted within PebblePad. PebblePad could just link to it, show it, allow it to be shared within the system. So partly, again, I think probably it may be a question of what's possible at the VTI end and how much work they've done on integration there. But we'd certainly be happy to try to integrate with that in whatever way is appropriate.
Fantastic. Okay, and Carol's made a kind of offer involvement, as is Patricia. Just to note, we're having conversations with VTI about integration or certainly connection from Planner into the proposed Higher Education Achievement Report for postgraduate research students. And it's interesting, we've had one conversation about that today, and it's interesting that the issue of the value of these support structures and mechanisms for postgraduate researchers is in here too. So
Yeah.
just to note some points of connection. The Vitae, of course, is a commercial product underpinned by the business model. And that may or may not influence how people feel about sharing. Okay, are there other bits that people want to raise at this point, or Shane, you're going to move on and give us an institutional view, aren't you?
That's right. It might be worth looking at the institutional view now, and then we'll come back to mop up any questions after that. Does that sound reasonable?
Sounds fine to me. Okay, aha. So an incentive there from Patricia, Shane, if you got that one.
I just pull back just as I left, yeah.
Okay.
So,
yeah, let's move forwards, and what we'll do at the end, please continue to put thoughts in the chat box, and we'll use that, but we'll unmute the mics and we can hear you eating your lunch right at the end. Thanks, Shane.
So here's this is me as a tutor now. It looks, essentially the same, and that may well be because as a tutor, I'm also being supervised myself, maybe doing PhD research, or because there's some mentoring process for new tutors. In the timeline here, what I get to see is anything that relates to me, and that could be an item that I'm working on with one of my students, for example. We think, though, the most likely place the tutor will go to is the groups bit. So this shows me my groups. And I've got two groups actually set up. I've got a PhD students group with 3 students in. And this little dashboard here is really just showing me that 2 of them have highlighted something. One's not very busy at all, and I might want to have a chat with John because there's not a lot going on here. Sophia is extremely busy, and in fact I can also see John's not very busy, and there's an alert been raised about him. So if I click on that, I get a little bit of information, and this alert, at the moment this is coming from Atlas, and again we're using LTI to allow this to be for alerts to be raised from any systems that have this LTI integration. And the is that the only people who can see my timeline and so see all of my grades and all of my feedback are the tutors specifically, as in the personal tutors specifically associated with me. So someone who happens just to be teaching me on a module doesn't get to see all of this. But they may have concerns about my work, and so we've built into Atlas this ability to raise that alert back with the tutor so the conversation can take place during the tutorial. That's a bit of a trivial example there, of course, but it might be more like if I look at Emily, I see Emily in my second group also has an alert raised, and this alert is telling me that maybe she's colluding a little bit too much with one of her colleagues, and again it might be something worth bringing up in the tutorial. So this is just a way for people who aren't personal tutors to raise those kind of concerns to the personal tutor themselves. Now if I look at my own profile here, so this is me as the tutor looking in, or in fact I'm now pretending to be Aaron, looking at my list of students. I can see I've got 2 items flagged for Shane. So what I'm going to do is go and view Shane's timeline. So I can see exactly what my student can see. And I can do things like, show me just the flagged items, because I know we've got the tutorial coming up in a moment. Here are my 2 flagged items. What did I write? Okay, that one just says talk about it in the tutorial. Again, it's fairly random data in here, but that's the idea. I know I've got a meeting coming up. I can look at those flagged items. I can look at alerts. I can look at grades and get a sense of how my individual students are performing. And that's, I guess, showing me what this is showing me is a historical perspective in a way. This is stuff that's been happening. So some stuff has been highlighted, some stuff has been flagged, some alerts have been raised. My students have been sort of this busy, and I can use that for comparative purposes to see, well, all of these other students haven't. But of course, in this case, they just test data. But if I want to now start managing proactively to start planning for stuff, I can do things like take this group of students here, and I want to create a meeting with them. And I've been hearing a little bit recently from 2 or 3 institutions, more actually, that are talking about being unable to commit to tutorials, and they're instigating systems of like group tutorials, and only then if students raise particular concerns do they have a personal tutorial. So here I'm just managing a meeting, so let's call this one preparing, oh, excuse my terrible typing, preparing for transition to whatever I'm transitioning to. The meeting's going to be in SE116. Choose a time, and there's just, you know, it's nothing super clever, but when I choose times, it's telling me how long the meeting is. It will alert me if it's a meeting that goes over more than one day, that kind of thing. And Claire, in response to the question I just saw pop in, it doesn't yet. We've got a test integration with Google Calendars, and the reason we've got that is because 2 of the institutions we started working with use Google Calendars. We know it works. We haven't had, because it's also new. It's, you know, it's on the waiting list. But that's quite an important bit of the future roadmap for the product, to talk to existing calendars. I can add other people to the meeting, give people notes, tell them what the meeting's all about, and that, if I arrange that, that will appear on their timeline and alert them both when they next log in and via an email. So that's how to set a meeting up. Also what I can do is create a task. So I'm going to grab all of these students here, and I'm going to create a task for them. And you saw what the task looked like. Oh, what happened there? Let me unselect some people. This is perhaps the problem with doing it on the test server. Let's try that again. Something seems to have gone a little bit pear-shaped there, and I don't know why. I'm just going to do a little refresh. Boom, boom, boom. We also have periodic updates to this when the developers send new work to the server, and I have no control over it, I'm afraid. So let's try again. Let's create a task. There we go. That's not very happy with that, is it? Let's hop over here, and it might just be that there's a browser issue there. Let's see how this works. There we go. So when I create a task, and this might be, as we looked at before, preparing for a tutorial, do some stuff using, and I can put hyperlinks and all sorts in there, but what I actually want to do is add some very specific templates. So I'm going to add in this template here, and maybe it's because it's a teaching thing, I'm adding in the science standards for QTS, and those will get delivered to all the students I distribute this particular task to. Now, I'm not going to carry on and do that because it's probably better for me to show you what a task looks like. And yes, Claire, you can send email alerts. So I'm going to hop up to this does appear to be not very happy over in Firefox at the moment. Let's try again. Oh, there we go. So if I go to task management, this will show me the tasks I've already created. And that's because I can take the same tasks and redistribute them many times. This particular task here I want to look at has been sent out to 12 students. And at a glance I can see that of those 12, 5 haven't yet started, 6 are in progress, and 1's completed the task. And if I look at one of those distributions, and the reason we have these things called distributions is you might have created this task, or more likely a more complex milestone or pathway, but you may have some students starting, well, let's say, for example, some students start on the 1st of October, but your overseas students actually don't start until the 1st of November. And you have the same tasks required to be completed also by your semester 2 intake in February. So you can take the same task and just redistribute it many times to different students and just push all the dates on for everybody. And what I can see for this progression is, again, 5 not started, 6 in progress, and 1 completed. But more importantly, I can see the individual progression of individual students and how they're doing against this particular task. And we know from the people we've talked to, particularly around research supervision, that this is going to be really valuable for them. And this can provide stats for many hundreds or thousands of students, and allow you to organize the data, if you like, by groups, research supervisors, and so you get a real sense of progression across the institution. So that's how can you be in the pilot? We're talk to me offline, please, Carol. The next thing I think, and probably the final thing to share with you, is as a teacher, I don't just create my own groups, because that would be inappropriate for me to be able to allocate myself to students and see all of their work and their grades and feedback. So it's all done in the administration part, and you can create a new group. You can actually integrate these groups. One of the questions we had before was, can we map them to, for example, LDAP groups, sysadmin, as in student information system groups, Blackboard groups, and yes, we can. So if I call this Shane's PhD students, blah, blah, blah. And we have fairly standard group types at the moment, and this may change over time, but we've tried to keep it simple. If I'm going to call this a research group, you'll see the kinds of people in the group have these roles. If I call it a teaching group, we have these kinds of roles. And those roles have slightly different permissions that allow you to do different things. We're keeping that fairly standard at the moment, and we're trying to introduce complexity only when it's absolutely required. And then I would start adding my users to that particular group, and of course adding managers to it as well. So I think I've probably gone on a bit longer than I intended to, and I want to leave some time for questions. I didn't talk about conversations, which is a shame. Conversations is the bit where I can start a conversation with a student or students and observe that over time. And we see conversations. So although you can comment on all of the things in your timeline, conversation runs sort of independently of that, and allows me to kind of maintain like a thematic conversation, perhaps during the whole of my study at the university. So Rob, I'm going to stop there because I really would like to hear from people and answer some questions.
Fantastic. We've unmuted the mics. Claire's put one into the chat box. So just while people are thinking about what they want to ask, do you want to just deal with that one about they don't have to be in Atlas? I mean, I don't know whether it relates to what I wanted to ask, which is, if I'm a university, I don't have PebblePad, but I do have an issue with tutorial support, can I ring you up and say, can I have Flourish? I don't want PebblePad.
You can, yeah. So, and we're doing the same thing with Atlas as well. So if you want an e-assessment system, you can use just Atlas for that. You wouldn't get as much value from it, because I think part of the value of this is not just arranging a meeting, for example, with your students, but saying, there's a meeting taking place, complete this template, which prepares you for the tutorials, you get more out of it. And the template build is part of Pebble Plus, and I think that's a really important bit of this. And it also means that the students get a record to keep and take with them. So, but certainly you can. If you just need a personal tutoring system or research supervision system, then
Yeah,
you can have this on its own.
yeah. I mean, I was thinking actually the institutions that have, say, got systems for issuing interim hears to students may have some of this functionality in another system, but not the functionality which relates to the person-to-person conversations and how those are managed. So, yeah, so that's helpful, and actually it does reprise a conversation we're having about research students. A couple of things in the box, and everybody's being very quiet. Do you want to pick up the question? I'm not sure it's a question or a statement from Claire about conversations can happen independent of modules. I'm making a conversation.
Although we're using the same term, conversations, it's because we like it. You know, a conversation is something which has, it goes backwards and forwards. In Atlas, the conversations that take place there are typically around tasks that people are doing, and they probably have a shorter shelf life because they're typically more module based. In Flourish, the idea is these conversations last until the last person stops adding to them, and they're typically a conversation between the student and their supervisor or their tutor, and it's just a record of all the things we said to each other.
Yeah. Okay. So, and that will also have a potential value should the tutor be invited to write a reference which is more personal than the she was a student here from 1999 to 2002, and they got a 2-1.
Absolutely, and I think, and I don't. This is not a great selling point in my normal lexicon, but I think for institutions where students might turn around and say, "No wonder I failed. I got absolutely no support at all," the institution will be able to say, "Well, wait a minute. You know, here's a record of all the times you were asked to think about your feedback, come and have a conversation about your grades, meet with your tutor," and I think it might be, from an institutional perspective, very, very useful to provide evidence that they actually were supported.
Yes, or conversely that they weren't.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So I just saw Hannah's question pop up there. Can you instigate an individual conversation? Yes, you can. You can, Hannah. And I think, I'm sorry I'm having to say I think, because it's all still so new. I think what you can do is you can say, this conversation belongs equally to all participants that I invite to it. Or you can say, create this conversation for all of these students. So you might say, you know, this is our ongoing research conversation. You must all contribute to it, and I'll reply independently to you, so everyone gets their own version of it. Or you can say, this is our group tutorial conversation, and everyone contributes to that same one.
Fantastic. So yes, Kath just pointed out, if people want to speak, if you can speak, yeah. I mean, you could mute yourselves, colleagues, if you want to, by just clicking on the green microphone next to your name. And open plan offices are the bane of webs very often. Are there other things that people want to pick up with Shane, either in the chat box or by speaking for real?
While people are thinking about that, I mean, I'm also, of course, interested in whether what you've seen looks like it. Well, does the concept make sense? Because we've tried to create a tool, you know, everything from executive coaching through to personal tutoring, and we wanted to do well in all of those different contexts. Does it look like it's a tool that would have a place, if you so desired it, in your institution, because it looks like it might solve a problem that you have?
Great news now is you can hear people typing. Thanks, Claire.
Okay, I mean that's really encouraging. Yeah.
lots of good, problems we don't know we have, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, super. And I've recently, I can't even remember, I was with some Australian colleagues actually, and they were really keen, or some of them were really keen to see this perhaps able to be used for peer learning as well. So that instead of people being allocated to a tutor, you could have groups within the same space where there's a peer group, and all of those conversational tools and would just be used then amongst that peer group. And that's something we'll definitely explore. Once we've got the other jobs on our to-do list done. But I think that's a great idea, and I think it's always the case that when something like this gets into your hands, you find all sorts of really interesting things to do with it, and also identify ways in which it can be improved, and that's the bit I'm looking forward to next.
Fantastic. Okay, we're almost out of time. Yes. Thanks, Teresa. I just wanted to mention one other thing, which is that if this is an agenda that is concerning to you and you haven't already looked at it, we're running a program next year called Tutoring for the 21st Century, in which technology will have a very central role, I think. So more about that to follow. Are there other things that people want to pick up with Shane now, other than beating a path to his door to be a pilot, a collaborator, an institution you'd be delighted that he went to work in, etc., etc.? I speak now as his agent. Okay. The slides will be available to you, and the record that will be with the audio, and the record of the conversation will be available. It will be with you, he said. Now, this is what I have to defer to Kath on, but I think we'll be able to get that to you this week. 24 hours, there you go. Fantastic. So you'll have that within 24 hours, which will be really good. And a great basis for following things up.
So as we end, could I say, Rob and Kath, thank you very much for organising this. Thanks everyone for taking part. I'm really sorry for scratching my beard at the beginning. And I do hope you enjoyed what you saw, and I'd be thrilled to get any questions from you after this, and certainly if you're interested in starting to use it early on, then chat to the people you normally chat to from PebblePad, and we'll get something organised.
Yeah, people giving you lots of feedback about the dentist, and the really weird thing is the sound just went a bit iffy then, and you were nowhere near your beard, so the beard may have got the blame inappropriately earlier. But it held out. Thank you ever so much, Shane. Been absolutely great, as ever. Have a good Christmas, everyone, if we don't catch up.